3 weeks before Christmas, I came home early from a cardiology appointment and heard my son on the phone in my kitchen, telling someone that I was losing my mind and that the house needed to go before spring. I stood in the entryway with my coat still buttoned, listening to every word through the wall. I didn't say anything that evening. I made soup, watched the news, went to bed at 10 o'clock like I always do. On December 25th, he called me at noon and said, "Dad, where are you? We're all here. The turkey's almost done." I told him to check the kitchen drawer, the one beside the stove. What he found in there made him go completely silent for 11 seconds. I counted. Then he started screaming, and I finally understood what winning felt like. My name is Arthur. I'm 64 years old. I spent 37 years as a structural engineer for the city of Burlington, Ontario, and I retired the summer before my wife Helen passed. I know how things are built, and I know how they fall apart. That knowledge, it turns out, applies to more than bridges. Helen died 14 months before any of this happened. Pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal, the way it usually is. We had 41 years together. Our son moved back into the house 8 months after the funeral, which I thought was kindness. He said he was worried about me rattling around alone in a 4-bedroom house. He brought his girlfriend with him. I put them up in the 2 rooms at the end of the hall, cleared space in the garage for his car, and told myself this was what family did. The doctor's appointment on December 4th ran short. My cardiologist is efficient. She looked at my blood work, said my numbers were excellent for my age, adjusted one medication, and sent me on my way 40 minutes ahead of schedule. I pulled into my driveway on Maplegate Crescent at 2:20 inches the afternoon, which was earlier than I'd told anyone to expect me. I came through the side door into the mudroom. Old habit. I've entered this house through the side door for 22 years, since we had it widened after Helen's mother needed a walker. I was unlacing my boots when I heard my son's voice carrying from the kitchen. He was on the phone, loud the way he gets when he thinks he's alone. "She's already drafted the paperwork," he said. "Pauline says with 2 assessments it's straightforward. Incapacity finding, then full guardianship. Once that's in place, I have authority over everything. The house, the accounts, his pension." A pause. Then, "The Burlington market is still strong. Pauline thinks 850, maybe 875. We clear his mortgage, which is almost nothing, and walk away with nearly 800,000. Another pause. His voice dropped slightly, but not enough. He has no idea. He's been going to bed at 10 every night, watching his Weather Channel. He's easy. I stood in the mudroom in my socks. The tiles were cold through the wool. I did not move for a long time. I heard him laugh at something the other person said. A comfortable laugh, unhurried. The laugh of a man who thinks the hard work is already done. I walked back out the side door, sat in my car in the driveway, looked at the house my wife and I bought in 1999, the house where my son learned to ride a bicycle on the front path, where Helen grew tomatoes along the south fence every summer until she couldn't anymore. $800,000. He had done the math. He had a lawyer named Pauline. I am a structural engineer. I do not panic. I calculate. Under Ontario's Substitute Decisions Act, a person can be found incapable of managing property if assessors determine they cannot understand information or appreciate consequences. It requires formal assessment, typically 2 qualified professionals. It is not fast, but it is not slow either. If they had already started, I might have 2 weeks, maybe 3. The holiday timing was not coincidental. Court filings slow down between Christmas and New Year's. A December application would create chaos right at the moment I was most isolated, most likely to seem confused, surrounded by the family pressure that makes these things easier. He had planned this carefully. I needed to plan more carefully. That evening I made dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, the way Helen used to do it on Tuesdays. My son came downstairs at 6, girlfriend beside him, and I watched his face when he saw me at the stove and realized he didn't know how long I'd been home. "You're back early," he said. Doctor was quick. "Good appointment." I handed him the salad bowl. "Can you put this on the table?" He did. We ate. His girlfriend talked about a Christmas party at her office. I asked questions and listened to the answers and watched my son watching me. There was something behind his eyes, a small worry he couldn't quite suppress. He was trying to calculate what I knew. I gave him nothing. At 10:15, their bedroom door clicked shut. I waited until 11:30, until the house had the particular stillness that means everyone's breathing slowly. Then I got up, dressed quietly, and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I wrote everything I knew: the phrase incapacity finding, the name Pauline, the figure 850,000, the timeline implied by his confidence. Then I wrote what I needed to do. Morning came gray and cold, typical Burlington December. I made coffee before anyone was up, and by 7 a.m., I was dressed and had my documents folder under my arm. I told my son I was meeting an old colleague for breakfast, which was true enough. Tom Burchell, retired city planner, sits at the Tim Hortons on Brant Street every Thursday morning. We've had coffee there for years. I did not tell my son the second part of my morning. At 9 a.m., I walked into the offices of a firm on James Street North in Hamilton, one my colleague Tom had recommended 2 years earlier for an unrelated matter. I asked to speak with someone about property protection and elder law. The receptionist brought me a woman named Sandra Kowalski. She was somewhere in her late 40s, compact and direct, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. I put my folder on her desk and explained what I had heard. I told her the name Pauline. I described the conversation exactly as I had memorized it. Sandra listened without interrupting. Then she picked up her pen. When you say guardianship and incapacity, do you know if they've filed anything yet with the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee? I don't know. They may have. Okay. She was already writing. Here's your situation in plain terms. Until a court grants them authority, your property is yours entirely. You can sell it, transfer it, do whatever you like with it. An incapacity finding doesn't happen overnight. If they've started the assessor process, we're probably looking at 4 to 6 weeks minimum before anything has legal teeth. You have time, but not unlimited time. What's my best move? She looked at me over her glasses. Protect the asset. If the house is gone from your name before any court order, there's nothing for a guardianship to control. It's clean, legal, straightforward. She paused. Is there somewhere you'd want to move? A plan for yourself beyond this? There was, actually. Helen and I had talked about Prince Edward County for years. Small house, quieter, lake views. We never made it happen while she was alive. It had sat in the back of my mind since the funeral like something I owed her. I have somewhere in mind, I said. Sandra recommended a real estate lawyer in Burlington for the house sale and gave me the name of a mortgage broker she trusted for moving fast. Fast and quiet, she said, when I told her the timeline. Can you be out before Christmas? I need to be out on Christmas morning, I said. She studied me. That's 3 weeks. I know. Okay, let's talk about what that actually requires. I left her office at 11 a.m. with a plan on paper and a referral card in my pocket. My hands were steady. An engineer does not shake when the math is sound. The real estate lawyer, a man named Doug Park, had an opening that afternoon. I drove to Burlington, sat across from him, showed him the deed. House registered in my name only. Helen had signed off her portion when we refinanced in 2018. He confirmed what Sandra had told me. I held complete authority to sell. Quick close as possible, Doug said. But the market in December is slower. Buyers exist, but they'll want a deal for the speed. I'll take 800 even, I said. No conditions, fast close. Find me someone motivated. He looked up. That's leaving money on the table, I'm aware. Speed is worth more to me right now than the extra 50,000. Doug made a call while I sat there. An investor from Mississauga, someone who bought and renovated in the greater Hamilton-Burlington area. Cash. No conditions. Interested in a pre-Christmas close. Doug scheduled a walkthrough for December 7th. I drove home. My son's car was in the driveway. I parked beside it, sat for a moment, breathed through my nose. He had called me easy. I walked in through the side door, hung up my coat, and helped his girlfriend carry groceries in from her car. The walkthrough happened while both of them were at work, 3 men with clipboards and cameras, professional and efficient, through every room in 90 minutes. I made tea and sat in the kitchen while they worked. When they left, I knew the offer was coming. It arrived the following evening, $805,000, cash, close date December 22nd. I called Doug from my car parked on a side street 3 blocks away, and I said yes. There were things I needed to do before the close. First, I opened a new account at a Scotiabank branch in Hamilton. No connection to the TD accounts my son had access to through my online banking, which I had been careless enough to log into on the shared household computer 2 months earlier. I told the Scotiabank manager I needed the new account for a property sale and asked that all statements go to a post office box I rented the same afternoon on King Street. Second, I moved the documents from my home safe. The real ones, my will, leaving everything to the 2 charities Helen and I had chosen together. Insurance policies, the car title, pension paperwork. I put them in a lockbox at the Scotiabank branch. In the safe at home, I placed something else. I had typed it on my old desktop printer, used a slightly older-looking template, and signed it carefully with a pen that needed more pressure than usual, the way an older hand might shake slightly in cold weather. A will, dated 3 years earlier, leaving the house and all liquid assets to my son. I put it where he would find it if he looked, which he would. Third, I spoke to a family physician my colleague Tom had recommended, someone who didn't know my son and had no connection to my usual GP. I explained that I was in a legal dispute involving a question of my mental capacity, and I needed a formal cognitive assessment for court purposes. She scheduled one for December 10th. I completed it in 90 minutes. Verbal fluency, pattern recognition, memory, executive function. She told me afterward, without hesitating, that my results were in the top percentile for my age group. I asked for a copy of the report in writing. She had it ready by December 12th. Each evening I came home, made dinner or ordered something, watched the news. My son and I talked about the weather, about hockey, about whether Christmas dinner should be a roast or a bird. He was attentive in a way he hadn't been since childhood, carrying dishes without being asked, asking if I needed anything from the store. The attention of a man who has decided his patience is almost over. Once I came home to find him in the hallway outside my bedroom. He said he'd been looking for the laundry detergent, which is kept in the basement. I said, of course, and pointed him downstairs and watched his face as he went. The slight flush in his neck that meant he was embarrassed and annoyed in equal measure. 2 nights later, I heard him through the wall. Not the words, just the tone, low and urgent. Then his girlfriend's voice, higher, a question, then silence. I knew he'd found the fake will. I knew what he thought he'd seen. I waited. December 19th. 3 days before close, I drove to Doug Park's office and signed the purchase agreement. My signature, clear and unhurried, on 7 pages of documents. Doug witnessed it, his assistant notarized, and I walked out of that office with the process complete and irreversible. The house would belong to someone else on December 22nd. That evening, my son poured us both a scotch after dinner, which he had never done before. He sat across from me in the living room and talked about the future in a careful, indirect way, how the house was big for one person, how there were lovely retirement communities in Oakville and Mississauga, how he and his girlfriend would always be there to help with decisions. I nodded, said it was good to think about these things, said I wasn't in any rush, said I was comfortable for now. He smiled with everything except his eyes. I slept well that night. The math was sound. December 22nd, I left the house at 8 a.m. I told my son I was doing Christmas errands, which was not entirely untrue. I drove to Doug's office, completed the final transfer documents, received confirmation that the wire had landed in my new Scotiabank account. $805,000. Settled, final, irreversible. I drove to a hotel on the lakeshore in Burlington, a quiet place I had chosen because it had a kitchenette and would let me pay week to week without questions. I checked in and brought up 2 bags I had packed over the previous 10 days in careful increments, adding a few things each time I left the house for appointments. Clothes, medications, Helen's photographs, the letters she wrote me in the early years before we were married, the essentials. That evening, I called Sandra's office and left a message. The sale had closed. I was out. I spent the next 2 days at the hotel, organizing. Opened my laptop and began writing a detailed, dated account of everything I had heard and observed since December 4th. Every conversation, every document, the name Pauline, the timeline they had discussed. Sandra needed ammunition. I gave her everything I had. On December 24th, I drove to Prince Edward County. It was a 2-hour drive, east, past Kingston, across the causeway. I had been in contact with a small real estate office there since the first week of December. A listing they had sent me showed a 2-bedroom house on a county road outside Picton, lake views from the back, a wood stove, 3/4 of an acre, listed at $340,000. I had put in an offer on December 12th, and they had accepted on December 14th. The close date was January 6th, which gave me a few weeks in the hotel, but that was manageable. I parked on the road outside the Picton house on Christmas Eve afternoon and sat looking at it for a long time. White clapboard, blue shutters, a cedar tree by the fence that was older than anything I had planted in Burlington. Helen would have said the shutters needed repainting. She would have been right. She would have chosen the color before we even got inside. I drove back to the hotel and set up a small string of lights on the window frame, the kind that run on batteries, which Helen always called her emergency Christmas. I ate a sandwich from the gas station down the road and watched the lake go dark. On December 25th, the call came at 12:07 p.m. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad. His voice had the practiced warmth of the last 3 weeks, but there was something underneath it, a tightness. Where are you? We've got everyone over. Aunt Ruth drove in from Kitchener. The turkey's going to be ready by 2. I'm somewhere peaceful, I said. How are you all doing? Dad, what do you mean? Where are you? Are you okay? Did something happen? I'm fine. Better than I've been in a long time, actually. I looked at the lights on the window frame. Check the kitchen drawer, son. The one beside the stove. There's an envelope in there with your name on it. Silence. What envelope? You'll know it when you see it. It has your name on the front in black marker. Read what's inside and call me back. Dad, you're worrying me. Just tell me. Read the letter, I said. Take your time with it. I ended the call, set the phone on the table, poured a coffee from the small machine on the counter, and stood at the window looking at the lake. The sky was overcast and gray-white the way it gets in southern Ontario on Christmas Day, the light flat and even across the water. 7 minutes passed. His number lit up my screen. I let it ring 3 times. Dad. His voice was completely different. The warmth was gone. So was the tightness. What was left was something stripped and hollow. Dad, what is this? It's exactly what it says it is. A copy of the sale agreement, December 22nd. The house closed 3 days ago. He stopped, started again. That's not possible. You can't just... I can, and I did. The deed was in my name alone. Check Ontario's Substitute Decisions Act if you'd like the full legal picture. Until a court grants authority over my property, the property is mine to do with as I see fit. I saw fit to sell it. You sold our home. His voice broke on the last word in a way I hadn't expected. I sold my home, I said, which I bought in 1999 with your mother, which you were invited to live in as a guest 8 months ago. A long silence. Then his girlfriend's voice in the background, high and urgent, asking what was happening. You did this on purpose. His voice had hardened again. You're punishing me for something. I'm protecting myself from something. There's a difference. What are you even talking about? Protecting yourself from what? I picked up my phone and looked at the time. December 4th. 2:20 in the afternoon. You were on the phone in the kitchen. Pauline had drafted the paperwork. Incapacity finding. Full guardianship. 850,000, you thought. Walk away clean. Complete silence. The kind that has a texture. I'm recording this conversation, I said. And I have everything documented with my lawyer. If you'd like to contest the sale, you're welcome to try. I also have a formal cognitive assessment from December 10th, conducted by a physician with no connection to anyone in this situation. Top percentile for my age group. You are welcome to that report as well. His voice came back very small. Dad, There's something else in the drawer. Under the envelope. It's not the real one, but you found it in the safe last week, and I imagine you've already made some plans based on what it said. I want you to know that the actual will has been updated. Everything goes to the Alzheimer's Society and the Canadian Cancer Society. Helen's decision as much as mine. We talked about it years ago. Nothing. I hope you all have a good dinner, I said. Give Aunt Ruth my love. I ended the call, blocked his number and his girlfriend's number, but not before taking screenshots of the call log going back to November, the texts, the timestamps. I texted Sandra. He knows. Call came in at noon. I recorded it. We'll send the file this evening. Her reply was quick. Good. Stay where you are. Don't engage further. We're ready for whatever comes next. Whatever came next took about 48 hours to arrive. On December 27th, Sandra called. He's filed an emergency application under the Substitute Decisions Act, claiming the sale was a product of cognitive impairment and should be reversed. He's retained someone named Philip Rowe, which tells you something, because Rowe does not come cheap. Can they reverse it? No. Not with your documentation. The assessment alone is enough to collapse the incapacity claim, and the sale was executed properly in every legal detail. What this is, she paused, is noise. Expensive noise. He's hoping to frighten you into a settlement. I don't frighten easily. I know. That's why I'm not worried. But brace yourself. These things get uglier before they resolve. His lawyer will argue you were manipulated, that someone took advantage of you. They'll look for anyone who helped you. Try to paint this as suspicious. They may contact your former GP. My former GP doesn't know about the Hamilton assessment. Good. Let's keep it that way until we need to produce it, which will be at exactly the right moment. I thanked her and went back to the window. The lake was gray-green under a pale winter sky. Somewhere in Burlington, my son was sitting with a lawyer on Boxing Day weekend, trying to find a thread to pull that would unravel 3 weeks of careful engineering. I had built structures for 37 years. I knew how to close off the weak points. January arrived cold and clear. I closed on the Picton house on the 6th as planned, moved my bags from the hotel, and spent the first 2 weeks unpacking slowly, arranging the small rooms to suit one person's life. I put Helen's photographs on the mantel above the wood stove. I hung nothing of my son. The emergency application was heard by a judge in Hamilton on January 14th. I attended with Sandra. My son sat across the room with his lawyer, and it was the first time I had seen him since December 4th. He looked thinner. His girlfriend was not there. The judge reviewed the cognitive assessment, the documentation of the sale, the deed history, the proper legal execution of every step. Philip Rowe argued passionately that the speed of the sale was itself evidence of impairment. No rational person sells a family home in 3 weeks. Sandra presented my engineer's mind in evidence. She explained, quietly and precisely, that I had sold under time pressure because I had discovered my son's plan on December 4th and had a finite window before legal proceedings could constrain my options. She submitted the recording of the Christmas Day call. The judge listened to my son's voice saying he didn't know what I was talking about, and then my voice reciting the details of a conversation I had memorized exactly. The application was denied. The judge's final comment, before closing, was addressed to Philip Rowe. He said that filing an emergency incapacity application against a man who scores in the top percentile on formal cognitive assessment, who executed a legal property transfer through proper channels with independent legal counsel, was not a responsible use of the court's resources. In the hallway afterward, my son tried to speak to me. I said I was happy to communicate through our respective lawyers and walked to Sandra's car. February brought the counterclaims Sandra had filed on my behalf. Compensation for 8 months of rent-free accommodation, $1,800 per month, the low end of current Burlington market rate. Total $14,400. Damages for the fraudulent incapacity scheme, the cost of my legal representation, the cognitive assessment, the new account setup, the hotel stay. An additional claim for defamation, because his application had alleged, in writing, filed with the court, that I was cognitively impaired when the evidence showed I was not. Philip Rowe sent a settlement offer, $20,000 to drop everything. I sent back a counter through Sandra. Full amount claimed, plus documented legal costs. Non-negotiable. 3 weeks later, Roe filed a motion claiming I had sold the house to deliberately harm my son financially, which is not a recognized legal claim in Ontario, and Sandra noted this to the court in terms that I suspect gave the judge a quiet moment of professional frustration. In March, I received a call from the Hamilton police. A constable explained that my son had reported me for elder financial abuse, claiming I had been manipulated by third parties into selling my home below market value. I went to the station with Sandra. I brought the cognitive assessment, the full documented timeline, the sale agreement, and Doug Park's confirmation that I had initiated every step independently. The constable reviewed everything, closed his notepad after 40 minutes, and told me I was free to go. He said the file would be marked as unfounded. I drove back to Picton through the March mud, past the fields going soft at the edges, the lake visible in flashes through the tree line. The court date on the compensation claim came in April. A different judge, a woman named Justice Helene Bertrand, who read everything Sandra submitted with the particular patience of someone who has seen this kind of case before. She awarded me the full rent compensation. She awarded the legal costs. On the defamation claim, she noted that filing a formal document with a court alleging incapacity in a person who demonstrably does not have incapacity without reasonable basis for the claim was actionable, and she awarded damages accordingly. Total judgment, $62,400 plus costs. My son stood in that courtroom holding a number that I knew he didn't have. He had been laid off from his position at the logistics firm in January, according to Sandra's investigator, a detail that had something to do with the court proceedings becoming visible in background checks. His girlfriend had left in February, which I learned from Aunt Ruth, who called me in Picton on a Tuesday and talked for an hour about how sorry she was and how she hoped I was eating properly. I told her I was eating very well, which was true. I had found a farmer's market in Picton on Saturday mornings and had become a regular at a woodworking shop that offered evening classes. I was building a small shelf for the kitchen. Helen would have found this deeply funny. I had never built anything small in my professional life. The bankruptcy filing came in June. My son and his girlfriend, as it turned out, had co-signed obligations together that neither of them could cover alone. The judgment sat at the top of their creditor list, like a flag on a ruined structure. Sandra told me I would see perhaps 10 cents on the dollar, eventually, through trustee distributions. I told her to keep me informed and went back to my woodworking class. The letter arrived in July. Handwritten, which I appreciated, my son's handwriting, which I had not seen since he was in school. He said he was sorry. He said he had not understood what he was doing until he was already too far into it. He said his girlfriend had been the one to contact Pauline, that she had framed it as concern for my welfare, that he had let himself be convinced because he was in debt and frightened, and he had made the worst decision of his life. He said he knew none of that was an excuse. He said he hoped one day I might be willing to talk. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in the folder Sandra had labeled with my name and the file number, and I filed it at the back after the cognitive assessment and the court transcripts and the sale agreement and the hotel receipts and the Picton closing documents. I did not respond to the letter. I called Sandra and told her my son had been in contact. She updated the file. She asked whether I wanted to pursue anything further given the bankruptcy. I said no. I said the legal system had done what I needed it to do, and I was finished watching him lose things. I was interested only in what I was building. She asked if I was doing all right. I looked out the back window at the lake, the water flat and silver under a July sky, a heron standing in the shallows at the far edge of my property, absolutely still, waiting with the patience of a creature that knows exactly how these things work. I told her I was better than all right. In August, I finished the kitchen shelf. It was simple, 2 boards and a proper dado joint, nothing complicated, but I had cut every piece myself, and it was level, and it was solid, and it was mine. I put Helen's small blue pitcher on it, the one she bought at a market in Stratford the year we got engaged, and I stood back and looked at it for a long time. My son sent a text in September from a number I didn't recognize. He said he was working at a hardware store in Hamilton, that he had a small apartment, that he thought about me every day. He said he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again. I blocked the number, not out of anger. Anger had been useful for a while, and then it had finished its work, the way a tool does. What was left was not anger and not forgiveness. It was simply distance, measured and permanent, the kind that a person builds when they understand that some structures are not worth repairing. A retired schoolteacher named Dorothy, who lives 3 properties down, invited me for Thanksgiving dinner in October, which in Canada means early October, and I went and ate turkey and watched her grandchildren run through the yard in the last warm light of the season, and I thought about how strange it was to feel this uncomplicated. The final trustee payment arrived in November, $312. I wrote a check for $350 to the Alzheimer's Society in Helen's name and put it in the post. On December 4th, exactly 1 year after I stood in the mudroom listening to my son on the phone, I walked my property line at sunset. A 1/4 acre of county limestone and cedar and old fence posts, nothing dramatic, everything mine. I had planted 4 apple trees in the fall that Sandra's daughter had helped me choose at a nursery outside Bloomfield. They were sticks in the ground now, bare and patient, holding the cold in their thin branches. An engineer understands that the most important structures are the ones you build after the demolition is done. The cleared foundation, the level ground, the materials you chose yourself. I walked back inside, lit the wood stove, made tea, sat at the kitchen table where the small shelf held Helen's pitcher, and the light from the stove threw warm angles across the walls of a house where no one plotted against me, where no one counted what I was worth and found me convenient, where the silence was not an absence but a thing in itself, something I had worked for and earned and built with my own 2 hands on ground that no one would take from me again. If this story meant something to you, please take a moment to leave a comment, subscribe to Subtle Vengeance, and share it with someone you think should hear it. There is another story waiting for you in the box on the left.